Hey everybody, I just wanted to jump on really quick to do a single reaction. I'm going to try to keep this nice and concise. I wrote down some notes as I was listening last night and losing my mind listening to it. I'm talking about the Barack Obama DNC Day 2 speech. So, let's full screen this lovely speech and let's get right into it.
Yeah. One more job.
Because we have a chance to elect someone who has spent her entire life trying to give people the same chances America gave her.
Now, this is slightly less hard-hitting than some of the other points that I made throughout the rest of his speech, but of course he's got to say this. You know, he's one of the biggest power brokers in the Democratic Party, and so he's got a shill at the top of his lungs for the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris. But I take issue with the fact that he says she's been fighting her entire life to give, what did he say? People a fair shot.
Trying to give people the same chances America gave her.
Trying to give people the same chances that America gave her. Now, I'm sure they could point to like certain, no one is a monolith. It's not like Kamala Harris has never done anything good in her life. The point is, what are you basing this talking point off of? Because the main things that Kamala Harris did was to essentially be a draconian prosecutor, and then she kind of looked past some massive corruption as AG, which we'll get to later in the speech, because he specifically delves into it a little bit more. But why are we trying to frame her as someone who's just been a champion of the working person for their entire lives when their record really doesn't have anything to stand on in that regard? But let's continue.
At a time when the other party had turned into a cult of personality, we needed a leader who was steady.
At a time when the other party turned into a cult of personality. Now, I don't disagree that the Republicans have kind of become a cult of personality, but American politics as a whole has. Why do you think there's no focus on actual policy going on as we speak? In this speech, there was more talk about policy in this speech, which was little to none, no actual specifics, just vague allusions to it. But there was more in this speech with that tiny little, amount than they've been talking about for the entire DNC. Kamala's not coming out and giving a concrete plan for what she's going to do with the nation. There's all that's going on is just a complete media whitewashing of what everyone knew to be true about Kamala. She's disastrous when she's on camera. She's got a terrible record, so bad that Tulsi was able to nuke her out of the race back in 2019 before there was even a single vote cast. And the only reason she's being talked about now is because she arbitrarily got picked by Joe Biden, probably because there was some power politics going on behind the scenes. And that she's just generally not a very likable person. But there's a complete narrative shift. It was on a dime. It was the same thing as back in 2019, how it was totally fine before Joe Biden was the not just the presumptive nominee, but the person that the establishment kind of coalesced around, it was totally fine to criticize his age.
They do not have to buy in.
You just said that. You just said that 2 minutes ago. You just said 2 minutes ago that they would have to buy in. You said they would have to buy in.
Have to buy in. If she qualifies for Medicaid,
are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago?
Be in for it.
Are you forgetting already what you said just 2 minutes ago? I mean, I can't believe that you said 2 minutes ago that they had to buy in, and now you're saying they don't have to buy. You're forgetting that.
I said anyone.
I mean, look.
As soon as he became the presumptive nominee, all of a sudden you were ageist. You were just a conspiracy theorist for talking about his age and mental decline at all.
Are affecting his approval rating.
What I find interesting is that issues more around ageism and ableism.
And for 4 years, they gaslit anyone who even dared to say any of that until it blew up in their fucking faces.
And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Now, did they actually pay a single price for that with anyone who watches that media, that crap, CNN and MSNBC? No, they didn't. It's just like when Fox News would lie at the behest of their preferred candidate and then they would get caught. None of the Fox News voters would do a mea culpa and say, wow, why do I watch this absolute slop? Same thing happened with MSNBC and CNN viewers. They didn't turn around and go, wow, they really were gaslighting me for the last 4 years. No, they didn't go, what was this about cheap fakes? The shortest spin campaign in history when they were saying that it was deceptively edited. It was real video, but it's deceptively edited to make Joe Biden look like he's a senile old man, when literally you could just look at the guy in almost any video and realize that he's failing in the brain. And so all of a sudden, on a dime, it became not okay to criticize him for that. Well, kind of the exact same thing happened around Kamala Harris. There were articles after articles about how she's the most disliked vice president. She's deeply unpopular. People don't like her for good reason. And then right when Joe Biden was forced out, all of a sudden, everything switched. There was no talk about her record, no articles about how she was deeply unliked. All of a sudden, there's just puff piece after puff piece being written about her. And it's been a complete 180 of the, I don't want to say liberal media, because I guess the shit liberal media, because they're not actually left, they're just pro-corporate. But the shit liberal media circling the wagons to protect their new candidate, Kamala Harris, and trying to make her seem to be this super popular figure. And the manufacturing can only work on so many people. Most actual human beings see right through all of this manufactured hype around her and refuse to vote for her.
The truth is, Donald Trump sees power as nothing more than it means to his ends.
Donald Trump sees power as nothing more than a means to his ends. This is coming from a guy who ran on progressive issues during his initial campaign and then kind of walked some of them back for the second campaign, but did a similar thing. And then completely governed as a moderate Republican when he got inside.
The truth of the matter is that my policies
are so mainstream that, you know, if I had said the same policies that I have back in the 1980s, I'd be considered a moderate Republican. I mean, you know.
In fact, took some plans directly from these deeply conservative groups. Using that, he basically established, using his power, his, 2 terms as president, he established himself essentially as a behind-the-scenes power broker within the Democratic Party, almost tried to create a lifestyle brand that's kind of just known by people who follow politics, is that you hear the rumblings of the Obamas behind the scenes trying to be these public figures for life. Now, if you're a former president, you are going to be a public figure for life, but trying to be almost media figures for life. And on top of that, let's not forget who decided to enrich themselves directly after they got out of office. So here we go from the BBC. Obama criticized for $400,000 Wall Street speech. Former U.S. President Barack Obama is being criticized for reportedly agreeing a $400,000 fee for a speech to a Wall Street bank. The deal comes less than 100 days after Mr. Obama left office. In 2009, he told CBS, "I did not run for office to be helping out a bunch of fat cat bankers on Wall Street." So, the dude who bailed out banks and was a complete friend to Wall Street while he governed as president didn't want to just personally enrich himself. It wasn't just a means to an end for him. Right.
He killed a bipartisan immigration deal written in part by one of the most conservative Republicans in Congress that would have helped secure our southern border, because he thought trying to actually solve the problem would hurt his campaign.
So, that's a lot of stones being cast from a glass house about how, and I'm not defending Trump on what he did, it's all cynical political posturing while they tell people that they actually care about an issue. So there were rumblings, alluding to what he was saying. There were rumblings about Trump behind the scenes lobbying to try and kill the bipartisan immigration bill because he wanted to be able to run on it in this election. Now, if true, that's ridiculous, and it shows that he doesn't actually care about the issue to get it done. He just wants to be able to run on it. However, let's not act like the Democrats are above that. Throughout the years, they have had so many opportunities to protect and codify abortion rights, which they love to campaign on. Now, that's why I think they didn't, is because just like Trump, once you fix the problem, you can't run on it anymore. So let's not act like both sides don't do this exact same thing, this cynical party posturing with these actual consequential pieces of legislation in order to just further their own political benefit.
He doesn't. And most are safer back in politics from a guy whose act has, let's face it, gotten pretty stale. We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos we have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse.
Blustering, bumbling, and chaos. I would say 4 years under Joe Biden, or whoever's actually pulling the strings behind the scenes for Joe Biden, have been blustering, bumbling, chaos as well. We're in a new proxy war that draws us closer to World War III every single day. Every day that we don't put a leash on Zelensky and tell him that he can't do some of these insane provocations, we're now funding a genocide in Gaza. So, blustering, bumbling chaos. Inflation is the worst since, what have they been saying, for at least 4 or 5 decades? Now, you can't put that all on Joe Biden, because that's a consequence of a lot of different factors, but the dude definitely didn't do almost anything to fix it. So, I'm not advocating for either side. I don't like either side, the Republicans or the Democrats. I think that they're two heads of the same political hydra. Both of them could give two shits about you, the voter. Voters just fall for their preferred rhetoric, and then they get to wrap themselves in this blanket of thinking that they're on the righteous side, when in reality, you're voting for two heads of a corrupt coin that's not actually going to fight to fix anything for you. Electoral politics is not actually going to fix this country. Trying to vote for a savior is the easy way out, and it's not going to work, even if you get your perfect candidate in.
As you heard from Michelle, Kamala was not born into privilege. She had to work for what she's got. And she actually cares about what other people are going through.
Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Kamala Harris's childhood background, but like, sure, she grew up in Oakland and stuff. I don't know if she was born into abject poverty, but I highly doubt that, considering her mother, who was a very intelligent and successful immigrant from India, was a cancer researcher. Now, I'm not going to pretend that, you know, they're getting paid buku bucks over there, but it's not like mother, you know, nothing against janitors or anything, but just for an example, for something that doesn't traditionally pay super duper well. It's not like, oh, I grew up, mother, single income, was a janitor, and we barely scraped by. Pretty sure cancer researcher affords you, at the very least, a decent upbringing. Now, I'm not going to say Kamala didn't have to work for where she was. No one should claim that, unless there's evidence to support it. But I also do know her dad is still, I believe, and was a professor at the time, which, again, teachers are not exactly getting paid insane amounts of money, but it's, again, not a profession that's commonly associated with poverty. So let's not paint her as if she just came up out of the slums of Oakland and picked herself up by her bootstraps. In fact, she moved to Canada to go to high school. I believe she graduated from like Westmount High School in Canada, in Montreal.
She's not the neighbor running the leaf blower. She's the neighbor rushing over to help when you need a hand.
No, it's such a
As a prosecutor,
analogy.
Kamala stood up for children who had been victims of sexual abuse.
And as a prosecutor, she tried to throw the parents of truant children in jail.
So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco.
And also decided to go after thousands of nonviolent drug offenders who just had possession of weed
There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man until courts forced her to do so. Tulsi pointed that out in 2019 on stage.
She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so.
And she kept people in California beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor. Because if you don't know, California loves their prison labor.
She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California.
So, let the whitewashing of her prosecutorial campaign begin.
As an attorney general of the most populous state in the country, she fought big banks and for-profit colleges.
Fought big banks and for-profit colleges. Now, let's just go see what she did during 2008. Here's an article from populardemocracy.org, the Center for Popular Democracy. Kamala Harris fails to explain why she didn't prosecute Steven Mnuchin's bank. Now, if you don't remember, Steve Mnuchin was involved in the Treasury in Trump's campaign, in Trump's White House. Now, Steve Mnuchin, not a great figure. Dude is a complete Wall Street cutthroat capitalist who quite literally would throw people out of their houses if it meant making him more money, which is what he did. So, he had a bank. He was the CEO of One West Bank from 2009 to 2015. In an internal memo published on Tuesday by The Intercept, prosecutors at the California Attorney General's office said that they had found over 1,000 violations of foreclosure laws by his bank during that time and predicted that further investigation would uncover many thousands more. But the investigation into what the memo called widespread misconduct was closed after Harris's office declined to file a civil enforcement action against the bank. So really, as Attorney General, she really went after the big banks, huh, Obama? She let this dude, this cretin, Steve Mnuchin, get off scot-free after he was responsible for kicking and supposedly illegally kicking thousands of people out of their homes, foreclosing on them when they should have still been able to keep their homes, at the very least for a little bit longer. Just didn't prosecute him. Declined to prosecute. So, whatever Obama's going to point to about her going after big banks, does it negate one of the biggest failures in the last 2 decades? Now, Obama should know about failing after the '08 housing crisis. The dude went and bailed out Wall Street and the big banks. So him and Kamala kind of fit hand in glove right there in not actually doing anything to solve the problem after the 2008 housing crisis. So I shouldn't be that surprised.
Now, it won't be easy. The other side knows it's easier to play on people's fears and cynicism, always has been. They will tell you that government is inherently corrupt, that sacrifice and generosity are for suckers.
I noticed this. It's a common tactic. You sprinkle something that is true that you want to discredit in with something that is so obviously false, where government is inherently corrupt. Well, just generic government is not inherently corrupt. The American government is inherently corrupt. So I think most people, even a lot of Democrats, would be like, well, yeah, it is. So how do you discredit it? You immediately false equivalence it with something that is ridiculous, which is what does he say here? That sacrifice and
inherently corrupt, that sacrifice and generosity are for suckers.
Sacrifice and generosity are for suckers. Now, anyone with a brain would go, no, that's not true. Sacrifice and generosity are good things. They're virtues. So all of a sudden, it's this false equivalence where, oh, if I think that the American government is inherently corrupt, then I must also think that sacrifice and generosity are for suckers. And I don't think that. It's subtle mind games, especially in Obama's speeches. They're meticulously written to prime subconsciously a lot of these liberal-minded voters and to pacify them at the same time.
And since the game is rigged, it's okay to take what you want and just look after your own. That's the easy path. We have a different task. Our job is to convince people that democracy can actually deliver.
Now, you know what would have been really convincing that democracy can actually deliver? The fact that you were elected twice and basically gave us nothing. What did you give us? You gave us a healthcare plan straight from the Heritage Foundation. You said it yourself. You got in as a response to the neoconservative way of governing that people were sick and tired of, and you governed like a neocon with little tinges of slightly left politics thrown in there. So tell me why people are supposed to be convinced that democracy can actually deliver when we delivered you to the White House twice. And what did you do? We got into more wars. You know, we elected the drone bomber in chief and killed tons of innocent people under you. What did we deliver? What did democracy deliver us other than more disappointment?
They understand that we can secure our borders without tearing kids away from their parents. Just like
I find that insanely hypocritical and extremely infuriating. If you know anything about the whole kids in cages on the border issue that the shitlib media loved to politicize at the time, you'll remember this absolutely hilarious story. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. So you'll remember this absolutely hilarious story about how there was a 2014 or a photo circulating showing kids in cages, speechless. This is not who we are as a nation. Democrat Antonio Villaraigosa. This is happening right now, and the only debate that matters is how we force our government to get these kids back to their families as fast as humanly possible. John Favreau, who was speechwriter for Barack Obama and also one of the Pod Save bros. The facts. The photos taken by the Associated Press were from 2014 during the Obama administration, but were presented by liberal activists. I will say presented by, sure, some liberal activists, but liberal hacks, as if they showed the effects of Trump's immigration policy now. Villaraigosa, Favreau, and some others deleted their tweets when the mistake was pointed out. Now, I'm not going to go pretend that's what anyone who listening who has this knee-jerk inclination to me pointing out the hypocrisy and the failures of Obama and the Democrats, that does not inherently mean that I support Trump. I know, what a concept. There's a little bit of nuance in the world. I'm not purely red team or blue team. I call out both sides when they do things wrong. So do I think that Trump handled the border well? Absolutely not. However, I thought that it's hilarious that Obama built those cages and was doing essentially the same thing, slightly different on the actual policy, but built the cages that the kids were being put into, and has the gall to talk about how he's above the fray, how we can enforce our border basically without throwing kids in cages. So I just thought that was hilariously hypocritical coming from King Hypocrite himself.
For them, freedom means that the powerful can do pretty much what they please, whether it's fire workers trying to organize a union or put.
So he does this line that's meant to elicit a boo. Now, again, like I said in the previous video, do I think Trump is somehow pro-union and pro-worker? No. Alluding to what I just said, when I criticize the Democrats, it doesn't mean that I'm a Republican. Again, what a concept. So do I think Trump is somehow pro-worker and pro-union? No. But you know who else isn't? Joe fucking Biden. Joe Biden crushed one of the biggest strikes, or what would have been one of the biggest strikes in American history. The railroad union strikes. They weren't asking for much. They just wanted normal, common sense, everyday benefits that would be given to almost any other worker. And what did Joe Biden do? He told them kick rocks and get back to work, and crushed it.
The freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water and send your kids to school without work.
The freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water. Now, the clean water especially, I find, again, hilariously hypocritical from masterclass of being a hypocrite himself, Barack Obama. What was one of the biggest crises of Obama's presidency? Flint, Michigan's contaminated drinking water.
You know, generally I have not been doing stunts here, but, you know. And they didn't hear me. Hold on a second. Now, the reason I know I'm okay is because I already had some Flint water. Here we go. Thank you. I really did need a glass of water. This is not a stunt. Now, I'm going to talk about this. Everybody settle down. This is a feisty crowd.
What's still an issue going on today? Flint, Michigan's contaminated drinking water, along with countless other cities. Flint was just the poster child for this issue. Countless other cities that have contaminated drinking water. Now, at the time, they were talking about, oh, you know how much this is going to cost to pay for it, to fix it so that people can literally drink clean water, non-lead poisoned water. They were complaining about the cost. Meanwhile, we send hundreds of billions of dollars overseas to stoke tensions with a nuclear superpower. We send millions and millions of dollars worth of weapons to a genocidal regime in Israel, but we don't have the money to make sure that kids don't get poisoned by fucking lead-lined pipes. Fuck out of here, Obama.
And that if we want to win over those who aren't yet ready to support our candidates, we need to listen to their concerns.
I love how Obama has to talk to the liberal base and the shitlib media as if they're fucking children on what so clearly is obvious and what progressives have been saying for the longest time, which is, if you want my vote, you better listen to my concerns and actually come up with responses to them about how you're going to provide for me on X issue. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to deliver on every single issue. I know that that's not realistic, but do something other than scolding and shaming and having this hyperbolic rhetoric of, if you don't vote, you might as well be voting for Trump. You know, if you vote for a third party candidate, God forbid you vote your conscience and you say, I can't vote for either of these two parties because they're both terrible. I'm going to vote my conscience with a third party, even if I know they're not going to win. All of a sudden, even though your vote is going to a third party, somehow your vote is going to the opposition. Both of them engage in this. Both of them said, if you vote for RFK, your vote is going to the other person, which I think is hilarious, because how can votes be going two directions when they're going to a third party? They both just use third parties as a demon, or to demonize any voting outside of the two-party duopoly. Crazy how he has to spell it out, that you actually have to listen and potentially deliver for the voters. and that this is like some novel message when this isn't the basic of politics. You're supposed to listen to the concerns of constituents and deliver for them. And yet he's got to even do his cues, his hand gesture cues to really get it through the thick fucking skulls of a lot of these blue MAGA cultists who have just been so ensconced in this bubble of demonizing the other side, not listening and hearing them out, when most of the people are in the middle. Whether you're slightly left, slightly right, most people agree on most things. And God forbid we all just hear each other out, because we might end up realizing we have more in common than we don't have in common.
And over time, we become less safe. We shouldn't be the world's policeman, and we can't.
We shouldn't be the world's policeman. That's funny coming from a dude who just ramped up the drone program in the Middle East during his tenure, didn't get us out of any of the wars, continued all of our foreign interventions. Biden, even though I think it was a completely botched way of doing it, at least got us out of Afghanistan, but only to get us into a proxy war with a nuclear superpower, being Russia, and then also fund a genocidal regime in Israel. Nice.
Eradicate every cruelty and injustice in the world. But America can be and must be a force for good. Discouraging conflict, fighting disease, promoting human rights, protecting the planet from climate change, defending freedom.
It's so funny about how we should be, what is it? What did he say? He didn't literally say spreading democracy. That would be a little too on the nose, because every single time the United States says that we want to encourage or spread democracy or protect human rights across the world, it's not actually because we want to go in and protect human rights or spread democracy. It's literally because we want to go coup whoever happens to be the leader in that country, and we need a flowery reason to do it. So, there's a dictator in this country, and we got to go liberate the people and spread democracy. Meanwhile, we're in there cooing the guy from the inside and installing a puppet of our own choosing who's going to essentially give us unfettered access to their natural resources. It's a story as old as America. So I love how he keeps that door open. He's like, no, we have to continue that. We can't be the world's policeman, but we do have to continue doing regime change across the world.
Brokering peace. That's what Kamala Harris believes. And
brokering peace. Yeah, that's why we've gotten so far in brokering a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. Oh, wait, that's right. There was a peace agreement, and then NATO, through Boris Johnson, we sent that bumbling idiot over to Ukraine to tell Zelensky not to take the peace deal. So we could have had many, many thousands of Ukrainians and Russians still alive today. We could have been not as close to nuclear war as we are now. And NATO and the United States decided to do the opposite of broker peace, but to stifle peace.
So do most Americans.
Also, brokering peace, then how haven't we gotten a ceasefire in Gaza? A meaningful ceasefire, and gotten the hostages back through an agreement to a permanent ceasefire? Yeah, we're really good about brokering peace. That's why we had to be in Afghanistan for 2 decades. Everyone in this crowd, they just hear this language and they go... It turns on something in the base of their brain. And most of these people, they're well-meaning people. They want actual lefty liberal issues, which I empathize more because I am on the left. I just actually look at the policies and the actions of the person saying this crap, and it doesn't match the flowery language. That's the problem.
As much as any policy or program I believe that's what we yearn for.
I loved this little, and I'm going to wrap it up after this. I can't listen anymore, and it's already at the end. There's not really anything notable after this, but I just thought that this was a funny little point. He literally says, as much as any policy or
program.
But then he just basically says the American people are yearning to go back to normalcy and to be united again. And while that is true, how do you think we get there, Obama? You think it's just going to happen overnight magically? No. Things change in this country through policy. That's how the government fucking works. That's why having a campaign devoid of any policy is designed so that people can project what they want to see onto the candidate. That's all they're doing with Kamala, because they know if she comes out with any concrete policies, she's going to get, probably because they're going to be terrible, but she's going to get demolished. And so their whole strategy is to create this vague, nebulous candidate that you can project whatever you want to see onto her. They're not going to talk about any policy because the moment that she opens her mouth, her poll numbers crater. And so he's almost priming the audience and the Democratic base to accept that there shouldn't be policy. And we shouldn't accept that because policy is the only thing that matters. I don't care about your personality. I don't care about, rhetoric kind of goes in line with policy, but all I really care about at the end of the day is your actions on policy. What do you actually do? Obama ran as being anti-war and then only took us from, 2 wars to 7? So I don't care about what you say on the campaign trail. I care about what your actual record is. So this guy's just full of shit. I wanted to try and keep it as short as possible, but I'll try and shorten this up. It's a 36-minute speech, and, I can cut some parts out, but it's still going to be a long video. I just wanted to dissect everything that I can't stand about this man, because he is the epitome of such a polished politician who's able to, like I said, pacify the base into thinking that there's someone presidential and proper who actually knows what they're doing, when in reality, he's just as snaky as the rest of the politicians. He just knows how to play on your emotions. You guys can rightfully point out how Trump plays to his base, and yet you don't see the same thing happen to you when you're being propagandized by someone who knows how to push all the buttons in your brain. It pisses me off to no end to see people rightfully call out the other side and then have none of that same criticism for their own side. But yeah, that's about it for this video.